I just can never remember to do this. Is it recording?
Yes, it's recording.
Okay, great. Thank you. All right, so let's talk about these READMEs. Does anybody want to share one that was your group's favorite? Lobster Robbie.
I really like the minimalism and the, attention to just getting right down the brass tacks of Narwhal Assault.
Did you play Narwhal Assault?
We played Narwhal Assault.
Yeah.
Which shows the power of naming, I think, because it has the most it could just be a virus based on this README file. It's really sketchy, doesn't tell you anything, but we tried it out. I think we got a high score. I think he got 60 points. I think that was his high score.
It's been a while since I played Narwhal Assault, but it's a classic.
But it could have used a lot more information, pictures, let us know what we were getting into, good description of it. It just kind of left a lot to be desired in terms of the README.
Yeah. So looking through, we do kind of have the basics, right? Like, I always like to see the tech stack, the authors, those install steps, because sometimes they're going to be different, right? We've seen a lot of like clone it, install some things, run it, but this is going to change. And we may have more install steps once our apps get bigger. So I like to see this. Since it's a game, I think it's really nice that we have those instructions. But I think you're right. Like, this is super minimal. We maybe want to add some pictures, some more information as to what this app is. But we have a play it here link, so we could just sort of click and check it out on our own. Any other thoughts on this README? Like how we could make it better? Maybe you think it's good how it is. Chris?
I was just noticing that on this one, it kind of bummed me out that on the install instructions, they didn't take the time to put the git clone into code block formatting on Markdown with the backticks, because that makes it easier for me to distinguish that kind of stuff.
Totally. Yeah, I think formatting is super important. I do like that they use the little bullet points, but I think you're right. Yeah, whenever it is actually code, it's nice to get that formatting in there. Lobster Robbie, did you have other thoughts?
When we were playing the game, we couldn't quite figure out how to score points, and it wasn't quite there. So this would be a really good example of a GIF that shows a score point and a failure to score a point, so that we knew how we were supposed to play the game.
Yeah, that's a good point too. I think it's always great from a user experience perspective to just make it obvious how to play the game. But if it's not, anything we can do to help the user, I think is really important. So that could be really cool to add to this README for sure. Pat.
I think as much as this is missing a lot of information.
Yeah.
But it's so easy to look at too, which I appreciate. Like if there's a way to fill in this information while keeping this kind of format that they have going, I feel like is almost ideal.
Yeah. Now this is just my opinion, but I sometimes find READMEs with a lot of information just overwhelming. And I see those walls of text and tons of images and videos and GIFs, and I'm like, I'm not going to read this, right? I want to find that happy medium of this clean simplicity with actually information we do want. So I agree with that. Let's look at some more READMEs. Did anybody find any of these other ones kind of hitting that happy medium of all the info we want, but not overwhelming?
The book one minus all the pictures is good.
Minus all the pictures. Okay, let's look at this one. All right, cool. So we have some background information, which I think is nice to have. I wouldn't want to go longer than this, just kind of a short intro. What even is this application is good. They have all the technologies, APIs. I tend to like this next steps thing too, right? Just kind of acknowledging that this app is not fully complete. Here's where we're going to go next. And then we come to the screenshots. All right. So just two. And then we have some more instructions, TDD, all the contributors. So I would agree. I would say that this one looks pretty nice. We could maybe have some smaller screenshots. I'm not sure. Any thoughts on the screenshots from anyone else? Andrew, what do you think?
I feel like a lot of these readmes could have cleaned themselves up if they used a GIF instead of a bunch of pictures you have to scroll through.
Maybe, yeah. I think especially if the app is live, if I can just go to a link and go to it quickly and sort of see what it looks like. But if you're using a GIF, you can kind of see those interactions, right? And I think to your point, that would clean it up, but also would let me know what's going on in case I'm not really sure what I'm expecting to see. Peter.
Yeah, I think it'd be a lot easier to read if they scaled down the pictures, if they shrunk them, would be useful.
Yeah, I agree. Like this is, I have to scroll to see the entire image and that's not ideal. So I think just making a maybe half size would help a lot. And this would be a really solid README. Asisi, what do you think?
I'm just curious about the next steps. Like, it looks like they all decided to just like come up with like 2 or 3 points for the next steps because there are like so many. Like, does that make your application look like you haven't done anything to it or something when you have like so many like, you know, next step things like listed?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I think, you know, you'll notice that it's hard to say an application is ever finished, right?
Mhm.
You've probably finished a project at Turing and been like, oh, it would be so nice if I had time to add this thing and that thing and this thing. I think this, again, this is just my opinion. I think I would prefer that you call out that it's not done and show, hey, I want to still work on this. Here are the things that I want to do, versus kind of leaving it unfinished and not really saying anything about those next steps.
And I have another question. So like during the weekend, I was kind of like looking at, I was trying to make like a README template as well. And like a lot of people had like licensing stuff at the bottom. Like, can you tell, are we going to talk about it later or?
I can touch on that.
Yeah, I'm just kind of curious, like, when do I need to use it? And like, what do I usually write it in that section of licensing?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I can answer it now and we'll talk about it a little bit more later. So essentially licensing is saying, can somebody use this application, right? There's a lot of licenses out there. One of the most common ones that you'll see is the MIT license. That means anybody can use the app for free, whatever, no problems. Another word for this is open source. You may have heard this term kind of floating around. This means that anybody is free to use it. If you look at the Turing curriculum, you'll see that our curriculum is open source, meaning that you don't have to pay us money to just look at the lesson plans, right? Anybody can look at them for free and they're open. So when you're building your apps at Turing, you're not going to need to do any licensing, right? Nobody's going to come to you and be like, hey, I need your flashcards app. Can I use it, right? So once you're kind of working on bigger applications, maybe in the future you want to contribute to open source projects, you'll see more licensing, but it's not something to worry about now. So when you are kind of looking at outside apps, it may be something you pay attention to make sure that that licensing is set up. But yeah, it's not really going to apply with your projects at this time.
Okay, thank you so much.
Yeah, of course. All right. So we kind of like this club reads one here. Let's pick another one to look at before we move on. Let's maybe look at School Finder. I think I remember this one being kind of a lot. No, maybe not. Okay. What do we think about this one? Anybody see anything they really liked about School Finder or maybe did not like quite as much? Sean?
I didn't like how when I was talking with my group, I said it reminded me of those recipe websites where you go on and there's just a whole bio of someone's like trip to or studying overseas. I don't know. It's just something that's not, I mean, it does pertain to the app for sure, but there's just too much here. You could definitely skim this down and like less pictures, less about them and more just about the application.
As someone who loves to bake, I highly relate to that. I actually saw recently somebody developed a Chrome extension that lets you skip all of the words and just shoot straight to the recipe. Been meaning to check that out.
Someone brought that up. That sounds pretty, a great app.
Oh, perfect. Nice. Yeah, I agree. I think, you know, sometimes people are guilty of treating READMEs as their own blog, right? It can be great to give some background and go over your challenges very briefly. But once you start writing stories around, you know, this application started out and, you know, you go off and really tell a story around the app and you end up with just walls of text, that may be more suited to go into a blog post, right? If you do any blogging around your applications and you really want to talk about your wins and strengths, that can be a great outlet for it. But I think your README needs to be a little bit more streamlined. Just kind of those bullet points of what my main wins are, main challenges. Here's how you access my application, I think is a little bit better. Again, we're kind of running into these multiple images. I like this part, installation and setup. So you can kind of pick apart some things that are good about this README, but I think overall the walls of text are just hard to read, right? Jim, what do you think?
I was just surprised at how long it took me to actually find the little link to click on it to look at their beautiful app. And whereas the narwhal was just like, bam, start, go. And yeah, I can't. And I think a story might be nice if it's at the end, you know,
Oh,
and I have
maybe.
the choice. I don't have to like, okay, now I got to get through all of this. So, but yeah, it's making it clearer to see where you click to see the thing. It seems to be an obvious, easy one.
That's an excellent point. Put all of that important information right up front. How do I get to it? Technologies used, and then maybe the story at the end. I will say when I was working at my last dev job and I was kind of looking at people's GitHubs, the thing that was really frustrating for me is when people would put projects on their READMEs or their resumes, and then I would go to it and then the link would be broken, right? We'd go to that README and it would say, play it here. And I would click on it and it wouldn't work. That to me was an automatic like, oh no, I'm not sure about this person. So it's okay if your link doesn't work as long as you say something about it, right? Be like, you know, here's all the information about this app. It no longer works, but you can still look through the code. So also make it easy to find stuff. Employers can be lazy, especially when they're looking through a lot of applications. So you want to make it really easy to find that important information, right? If this is something that was a group project, you want to be linking to your GitHub profile, right? So that they can go right away and find you and look at your information. Same thing with those applications. GitHub deployment links, I don't believe expires. Once you're working with larger applications where you have to kind of like pay for a domain, those do usually expire, but they'll tell you. Chris.
I was curious to know your opinion on, like, I was messing around and like downloading some fonts and stuff off of GitHub. And then like, do people ever post like viruses or like questionable things on GitHub that like you might like, do things ever get vetted on as far as like safety in that regard? I don't know.
Yeah, actually, I think this question is going to be answered better in the NPM lesson because you're going to talk about dealing with things that are published on the web and pulling them into your own application. So I think I'll push that question off until then because I know it's going to be covered. If it's not, definitely make sure you ask again because that's a great question. Okay, I think it's time for a short POM. I think next we're going to move off from READMEs and start talking about GitHub issues. So let's come back at 51 and we'll move on to that.
Hey.
Right, so once everyone is back, we're going to start talking about GitHub issues. All right, cool. So I'm pretty sure this is new. I don't think I have seen anybody using this feature yet, which is great because we're going to go over it today. So GitHub issues are a way to kind of keep track of your tasks or enhancements or bugs for your projects. So thinking about that one README we saw with that whole long list of future kind of ideas for it, we could actually move that information into GitHub issues instead. It might feel a little bit cleaner. So most projects that you work on are going to use some kind of project board. We've seen GitHub projects so far. There's a couple other ones, Waffle, Trello, Jira. Jira is one that I used a lot on the job. You won't really see it here because it is a paid application, but a lot of companies like to use Jira to just kind of have all of that information in there. So it's something you may see later. And this is to organize and share progress and information across the team. Sometimes they're used just for developers, sometimes designers use them as well, just kind of depends on the company and the setup. These trackers often connect directly to GitHub issues, but offer a more robust UI experience. So there is a lot of functionality that some of these tools bring. Filing issues is an important part of the workflow process. It allows you to keep track of what type of work needs to be done. This is going to be bugs, nice to haves, security vulnerabilities, maybe, just depends. It also provides a way to prioritize work. When I was using Jira, it kind of used a color system where green was like low priority, kind of a quick fix. Medium was something that was just regular work. I think this was yellow. And then red was like, everything's broken. You need to fix this immediately, right? So a way to kind of prioritize the work and figure out what's most important and what needs to get done first. And then the last thing is who is responsible for that work. It keeps all of the team members in the know about who is handling what. As you work on bigger teams, this is going to become more and more important, right? You may be working on, a small task. You see that it involves another one, and you're able to see the name of the developer who's responsible for that instead of having to ask around. So just kind of ultimately keeps everything in one place, has all of that information that people can find easily. So we have this note here about keeping your issues up to date. Having an up-to-date list of issues indicates to potential employers that you're aware of what could be improved. We talked about this a little with the README, right? Just acknowledging that this app is not fully complete, but here's what I want to work on it. Here's the things that are broken, and I'm aware of it, right? That's all. Keep this in mind as you continue to build out projects at Turing. If there are bugs or future features you want to build out, it can be good to include them as GitHub issues. All right, so I want you to try this out before going over it myself. So I'm going to want you to do this on your own. I'll give you another 10 minutes. Pull up your current project, all right? And go ahead and click on the Issues tab, and then you'll see a button to create a new issue. You may not see this tab at first. If you don't, you're going to need to enable it. So we have instructions for making that show up. I don't think it does by default for some reason, so you're probably going to have to go through and do this step. Think about a feature or maybe bug that you have come across already on your project. Think of something very small, right? Like a little tiny task that needs to be done instead of a massive feature. Keep the title short and descriptive, and practice creating a user story to determine what should happen, right? Think about somebody using this app as a user. When I complete this thing, I want to do X, Y, and Z, or I expect this to happen. We have this note. You might want to include a happy path and sad path in your user story. And then think about any additional information that might be needed. This can include resources such as helpful links or relevant wireframes. So I'm going to give you a full 10 minutes to play around with this feature. You may end up adding a couple, just kind of get practice writing out those issues and exploring that interface. You can turn off your camera if you want. We'll come back and talk about this at 10:05, and then I'll show you my interface as well, so we can kind of look at that feature. And if you do have questions as you're going through, I'll still be here even though my camera's off. All right, it's 10:05. So go ahead and come back if you're still working. All right, hopefully that was enough time to at least get one. All right, so I do want to put you in breakout rooms so we can move forward and get you kind of sharing the way that you wrote this, because I know that everybody did this very differently, which is great. Do some comparing and contrasting. Any questions, or maybe this wasn't working for somebody before we go through and do that? Okay, looks like we're feeling pretty good about this so far, maybe. All right, so we're gonna go into breakout rooms. I'm gonna just put you with a partner. And so what I want you to do is look at this compare and contrast block. So read through your partner's user story, just kind of see what they initially did, take note of which parts are clear, maybe which details are missing, kind of compare and contrast what you did and what they did. Share some actionable feedback with each other, and then be prepared to maybe share some takeaways if we have time. If you get done with this, if you have a good conversation around the GitHub issue that y'all filed, totally fine to move on to this part here, where we're going to be adding labels to a GitHub issue. So there is an article that you can read, but if you want to just kind of poke around and see where those labels are, look at the different options and practice with adding a few to your GitHub issues. We'll do this for 7 minutes, then I'll come back, we'll talk about it, look at some examples, and then, yeah, we're moving towards the end. All right, so 7 minutes in breakout rooms. Any questions about that? Okay, cool, I'll open them now. Okay, sorry about that. So your project board is kind of going to be that initial planning step, right? Where you're looking at all of those features you need to build out. You're having a card for each one. Issues you'll probably see more later, right? When you're running into bugs, when you are running into future additions to your application, right? So we've made all of it, but then things are kind of coming up. So we want to file an issue. These are often things that we're maybe not going to do right away, right? We want to get the app built, so we're doing things off of our project board, but we know there's this little tiny bug over here that needs to be fixed one day, right? That's a great use case for issues. And they can be kind of used interchangeably, right? We are going to see where we can have issues kind of talk to our project board and vice versa. So that is great practice, but you may just be seeing it used in a different kind of circumstance. Does that kind of help?
Yeah, I think so. Like
Okay.
issues is more for like literal issues. And so we should be focused more on the project board.
Yeah. Assisi?
Do you have any example for the user story, like in the GitHub project and stuff?
Just an example of what one would look like?
Yeah.
Not off the top of my head, but I can post some resources for that after the lesson.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, you make sure I do that. Okay. Any other questions around this? Okay, I'm going to go through and kind of show what this looks like just really quick, kind of do a little test issue just so you can see this if you didn't get it working. But really just going to go to this section of my GitHub repo. I made a little example where we can see we can just file an issue here, give it a lot of information. Hopefully we're writing out that user story. I'm going to just say test issue. And then we'll see over here in the right, we can actually assign somebody just like in a pull request. All this should look pretty familiar. where we can assign somebody to work on this. Could be yourself. And then the new thing that we're looking at is a label. So if you didn't get a chance to look at this yet, that is okay. There are a couple sort of pre-filled labels that we can apply just to be really organized around what all this is, right? The ones I want to draw your attention to is this first one, where we have bug, right? That's kind of, as I mentioned, bugs that we want to make sure we're fixing down the line. There is enhancement that you might see as well. This is going to be things that you want to add to your application later that aren't exactly that MVP, but are things that you don't want to forget about, right? Maybe you're working on the app now and a month goes by and you kind of forget what's going on. Having these enhancement issues are really good just for jogging your memory. We talked a little bit about open source projects. This is something you'll see towards the end of Turing. Basically applications that anybody is free to work on. There's a lot of resources out there for finding open source projects to work on. And you'll see some more of these tags in those circumstances. So for example, this good first issue is something you may see on open source projects that are like, this is an easy fix. It's good for junior developers to work on. So it's not really a tag you're going to be working on your projects because unfortunately, you can't get other people to come in and build your apps for you, but you may see it out in the wild, right? Good first issue. You may see help wanted. That is this is an open issue. I really want somebody to help me and fix this. So there's a couple here. You also have the option to customize your labels a little bit. Yep. There's this little edit labels. So if you want to make something a little bit unique to your project, maybe change the color or the name, you can go into this interface and do that. But I think this is kind of a good starting point of the ones that exist already. All right, so those are labels. Okay, and then kind of the last thing I want to talk about is linking issues to your project board. But before we talk about that, any questions about labels? Yes, exactly, Sarah. We don't want you to have other non-Turing developers working on your apps for you. Awesome.
So if you have help wanted, does that mean anybody on GitHub can see that then?
Anybody on GitHub can see anything, even
Yeah,
if you
you're
don't
right.
have any label.
I guess does it provide if somebody wants to search help wanted, then ours would pop up or something like that?
I'm not totally sure. Maybe,
Okay.
yeah. But yeah, everything on GitHub is public. I actually had a weird occurrence happen on my GitHub a couple weeks ago. I was trying to learn this new language called Svelte, and I built just a really simple weather app just to see what it was about. And then I noticed that some random person forked it and was using my application to make their own Svelte application. And my app was public, so it was fine. This person couldn't hurt my app, but they could get their own copy and do whatever they wanted with it. Kind of felt a little weird and invasive, but if you make your apps private, this won't happen. And again, they had no power to impact my code or break my app or any of that, but they could get their own copy and make their own weather app, I guess. I don't know, it was strange. A CC.
And is that when we use the licensing thing, copyright stuff?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, I used to do more kind of volunteer teaching before I worked at Turing, and I would kind of make slides for different topics, and I would do MIT license and say anybody can use this content, right? If you want to teach a little workshop on intro to HTML, here you go. You can have my slides. Yep, absolutely. Okay, so we're not going to have time to go through, but just want to sort of talk about this a little bit. Andrew had the great question of what's really the difference between issues and project boards. Looking at this section here, we can link the issues to them, which can be really nice, kind of have things talking to each other. So assigning a person to an issue and linking an issue to a project board can help in communication across the team on who is working on what at what time. So to do this, we would first want to assign yourself to the GitHub issue. See if I can do this in 6 minutes. Let's go back to that issue that I'm going to create. It's going to be really bare bones just to kind of see what this is going to do. All right, so I think what I want to do first is create a project board. And if you haven't done it, we have that nice like tab here. We can give it a name. Create that project, right? And typically when we see project boards, we're going to have columns like to do. We like to have in progress. And we like to have done, right? Thinking about all of those states that that task may be in. Other ones you may see might be backlog. This could be a good place for enhancements, things that you maybe want to be done eventually, but aren't super important. So I'm going to add an issue. So I'm going to go back to that section there. All right, so I have my test issue. I'm going to have my user story here. And I would really want to take time to fill this out and have a detailed issue. I would want to assign myself. I could assign somebody else, but I'm really the only one on this app. So we'll say it's a bug. Okay. And then you'll see where we have this projects field. So I can go in here and select that project board I made. You may have multiple, usually you just have one, just kind of put all your tasks in one project board. Okay. And this kind of looks good to me. There's a couple other fields, but I want to just go ahead and submit it. Okay, and this looks very similar to your pull requests, right? We have all that sort of same information here. People can comment on it if they want. And then you'll see under projects, we see my example board, and then we have this little comment that says awaiting triage. Okay, this is saying we need to make a decision if this is a issue that is in to-do state, in progress, or done. So I can do it here, or I can visit my project board. Okay, and we see that it sort of pops out and it says we have this incoming issue. Where do we want to put it on our project board? I think I can just sort of drag it, which is cool, right? And now those are linked, right? Now we have that issue that we created that is a bug, and that lives on our to-do. So this is really great having things organized on that project board, because I know there can be a lot going on, especially when your apps get larger. So this kind of reminds me of Trello, just with the cards. I kind of like that interface. I can remove it if I want to. I can click into to maybe see more details about that. Maybe somebody has commented on it, and then I can sort of move it around. All right, so we can also see the issues count here and kind of go into that view as well. So lots of different ways we can see this information. One of the main things I want to make sure I say about project boards is it's really important that each card is one tiny task. This is something that will take practice, but we really want to get as granular as we can, right? Thinking about that common theme of really small functions, really small tests. We want to do the same thing with our project board because we want it to be really clear which tasks are in which state, right? So I may have other issues here and we're going to be moving them into the in progress. It's again a little hard to see because you're basically pair programming, working very closely together. But think about when you're on a larger team and there's many people working on the app, right? It can be really easy for this to get out of sync and maybe two people accidentally work on the same issue, which is not ideal. So just try to get in the habit of making your cards or your tasks really small and moving them through the process until they hopefully get to the done column. All right, so I know I didn't cover everything. The last kind of bit is code review, which I know y'all are great at. You've been getting lots of practice in Mod 1. We have a couple examples if you want to look at them later of some good, average, and bad code review examples. So definitely check those out. The last thing is pull request templates, which I know a lot of y'all have experimented with. If you haven't, this will talk you through how to get it started. Really just making a file, putting this text in there, and that's going to show up every time you make a pull request. Really useful just to organize things. Okay, last thing, there is a way to close an issue with a pull request. So whenever you're submitting that pull request, it will automatically take that issue you filed and mark it as closed. We love having things happen automatically as developers. So check that out if you're interested. If not, that's okay too. You might have to just do something manually to make sure that that issue is closed. So a couple things to check out. It's exactly 10:30. Do we have any questions that I can answer briefly before we start maybe taking a POM? Okay, cool. So I'm going to create a thread in your channel for this lesson. I'm going to post some examples of user stories, maybe find some articles and some things. If you have other questions or resources for workflow, feel free to post them there as well. And I'm going to turn it over to Neek. Neek, do you want us to take a POM first?
Yes, of course. Take 5 minutes POM, and then I'll see you at 9:35. There is a link on the calendar for the next lesson.
Yeah, we're gonna, oh, sorry.
That's all right.
We're gonna close out of this call since some people opted out, just so we all come back on a fresh Zoom.
Bye.
Bye.